One of the ways to recognize whether you have the gift of discerning of spirits or the lack of it is to reflect on your past experiences. When you've been betrayed, usually the first response is shock. But were you really shocked? I used to watch this show on the ID channel called Evil Lives Here. And it was a show about, people that knew or lived with murderers that weren't aware they were murderers. Maybe it was their family member until after the fact. And in the intro of the show, it would say something to the effect of, so and so didn't know this person was going to grow up to be a murderer, but there were signs. And that's the point I want to focus on in this video. Are you really naive? Were you really naive about this person, or were you just in denial? So discerning of spirits is one of the gifts that I believe that I have. So while thinking about this, I was reflecting on all the experiences I've had in my life where someone was revealed to be evil or having bad intentions towards me. And I couldn't think of a single time that I didn't have warning signs beforehand. Not a single time that someone completely shocked me. Now, it doesn't mean that there isn't a time that happened, but I can't think of one. Now, this isn't the same as reflecting on something and in hindsight, you see the warnings. I'm talking about in that when you're reflecting on it, in that moment, you knew it to be a warning and ignored it. I even thought of a situation when I was as young as 11 years old, and I saw someone's motive in what they were doing, just in their facial expressions, and ignored it. But I knew in the moment what that person's intentions were. So I want to focus on denial for a minute. We deny things for many different reasons, but I think the main reasons that we go into a state of denial is one, we simply don't want it to be true, especially if it's someone we love or care about. We don't want that thing to be true. And then another reason is very often you believe the way you think, the way you feel, your experiences are like everyone else's. So when you have good motives and intentions towards others, you assume they have the same intentions towards you. And it's really hard to believe when people are just extremely evil. Even though you know it exists, you either don't expect it to happen to you, or you just simply can't conceive of someone trying to hurt you for no apparent reason. I've had this same response when discussing, witches and witchcraft, where people will say, well, I don't know why somebody would do that to me. Like, I don't have a problem with that person, or I didn't do anything to that person. You don't have to. People will literally attack you in life, whether they're witches or the average person, for no apparent reason. And that's just hard to conceive of. But denying something doesn't make it not true. We may not want our loved one to have evil intentions towards us, but pretending like they don't does not make it true. And all it does is put you in a position to be hurt. Now, if you do reflect on situations in your life where you were betrayed and you were shocked, and you can't think of any warning signs that you recognized in the moment, only when you reflect back do you say, okay, that thing makes sense. But you're able to recognize you did not see that in the moment. Then maybe you don't have that gift. And if you don't have that gift, then you'll need to practice discernment and learn how to discern from those who do have the gift, like we do with any other gift in the body. So let's talk about what it is and how it operates. Discerning or distinguishing of spirits is a gift outlined in 1 Corinthians 12:10. And discerning of spirits is not the same as being a good judge of character. You could be a good judge of character because you have the gift of discerning of spirits. However, if you don't have this supernatural aspect that goes along with being a good judge of character, then you might just simply have a good judge of character based on experience. So here's what I mean. I've had examples in my life where a person has come into my life, or I met someone that gave no external evidence that they had any kind of bad motives or intentions. They seemed like totally normal people and kind people. So being a good judge of character and having experience and people, like just looking at their facial expressions and how they act and how they respond and whether or not they're being truthful, these people didn't show any signs or any red flags that they were, being dishonest. And actually, with the two examples that I have in my mind right now, this was something supernatural that happened when I first met them, like in that moment. One of which before they even had a chance to speak. So before I had any time to size this person up, something supernaturally and spiritual happened inside of me. It was like all my alarm bells inside went off and my heart was racing and I was having all the visceral reactions that you would have if someone displayed, these type of things or that acted as if they were a threat to you. My body reacted as if this person was a threat before they gave me any reason to think that. And I remember just being so confused and thinking, what is going on? Like, why am I reacting this way towards this person? They haven't even spoken. And one of them I actually spent a little more time with. It was a woman that actually came to a ministry that I was working for and was a guest speaker. And she seemed like the nicest, most soft-spoken, sweetest person in the world giving her testimony. But from the moment I got in the presence of this woman, I had these reactions. And I wasn't able to look at her face because the seating was limited and I had to sit behind her while she was speaking. And so I was just staring at the back of her head, dealing with these reactions, wishing I could look at her face so I could say, see, is this something just in my head right now? I need to look at her and judge if I think that she's an honest person. And, that's how I am when I'm judging a person, sizing a person up. I need to look in their face. I need to look in their eyes. I need to look at their facial expressions. And I wasn't able to do this with this woman. So I'm staring at the back of her head and I'm feeling all these feelings, just almost like a strong dislike for her. And that's very unusual for me. If anything, I like people that don't deserve to be liked. So I was feeling intense guilt about it later and was like, what is going on, God? Why do I feel this way about this woman? Like, I feel like I don't like her. And she's given me no reason to feel that way. But of course, it was only later until I found out, her and this other example I have in my head, they did have bad intentions. And what I was picking up on was spiritual only. And that is the gift part, the hint of the gift. Because nothing in my natural mind told me that these people had bad motives. It was something happening to me spiritually that I couldn't control. And that is the biggest evidence to me that I have that gift, because it's not something that I'm exercising because I have so much experience with it alone. It's because these things happened to me that were beyond my control. And then they turned out to be correct. And ironically, it's much easier to go into a state of denial when you have an experience like that because you can't rationalize it. There was no evidence yet that this person had bad motives. It was a spiritual experience alone. So you feel like you can't confirm these feelings that you're having are true because there's no evidence for it. But there needs to be a perspective shift there. Because if you have these type of reactions with zero evidence that confuse you, that should make your suspicion undeniable, because it's not something you contrived in your mind, or you're judging this person incorrectly. You haven't had a chance to judge them. So it should actually be the reverse. When something like that happens to you, you should pay attention to it more, because it's like the Holy Spirit's revealing this to you, even though you have no evidence to think that yourself. And that's a really hard thing to do. It's just like, the Lord giving you a dream, or the Lord telling you something about your life that hasn't happened yet. Usually, the circumstances are completely contradictory to what the Lord told you. So you can tend to go into this state of mind where you're like, okay, I must be delusional. I must have created this in my mind. But the reality is, you would have never created that in your mind because the circumstances are contradictory. Like, let's say you live in New York City and the Lord tells you, actually, you're going to live in Montana on a farm. And you're like blown away. Like, what? Like, I love the city. What are you talking about? Me living on a farm? And then maybe as time goes on, your roots get deeper and deeper in New York City. Maybe you bought a house. Maybe you signed a contract. And now you're like chained to living in New York City. So then you may be like, okay, I made that up in my head. I mean, obviously I have to stay here. I've signed this contract. There's no way I'm living in Montana. I just made this all up. But did you? Why would you ever think, if you plan to live in New York City forever, why would you randomly think, I'm going to live in Montana on a farm? So the strangeness of it, when it's not something you would come up with and it doesn't match your circumstances, is very often evidence that God did say that thing. Just like with the discerning of spirits, feeling those reactions with no evidence, something you would not have contrived in your mind, is evidence. Someone else told you that, the Holy Spirit. So, I was also thinking about how my discernment has increased over the years. And I was thinking about, how when you have this gift, how it grows, how it gets sharper. And I was wondering if it got sharper simply based on experience, and your giftedness is wrapped up in these supernatural aspects, as well as the Lord giving you these experiences intentionally throughout your lifetime to sharpen your gift. So it's both supernatural, spiritual, and experiential, and training in that gift. Because if you're not careful, you could think, well, I don't really have this gift. It's just I've had so many experiences with people like this that I know how to spot it. And again, like I said before, that may be true if you don't have any kind of spiritual aspect to it. But it is not that you don't have that gift just because you've had so many experiences to sharpen it. Hebrews 5:14 says, "But solid food is for the mature, for those who have their powers of discernment trained by constant practice to distinguish good from evil." Notice it doesn't just say, for those who train in discernment. It says, for those who have their powers of discernment trained. So for those who already have the gift of discerning of spirits, it is sharpened through training. So it is not necessarily that you just have a good judge of character. Your discernment increases as you are trained experientially. It's not just this supernatural magical power the Lord throws on you. Your gifts will be sharpened through circumstances and life experiences. So if you have this gift and have experienced many betrayals, reflect on them and reflect on the warning signs that you ignored. Then reflect on the reasons why you ignored them. Whether you felt like you were being judgmental, whether you couldn't conceive of this person, having those motives, or whether you just didn't want it to be true. Only when you reflect on these things and you're authentic and real with yourself, can you learn from those mistakes so that you don't experience those types of things again. Now, that doesn't mean that betrayal is not inevitable. It is inevitable. You're going to be betrayed. People are going to attack you. You're going to get hurt. And one of the questions that I was asking God is, when is there enough red flags? At what point do I say, okay, that's red flag number 10. I'm walking away from this person. That's really difficult, especially as the red flags get more and more subtle. Maybe you just pick up on little things about a person. Okay, well, they're dealing with a little bit of selfishness. That kind of sounded envious, but I'm not sure. I really can't think of a time that this person has called me unless they needed something. So right now, I think this is the best answer to that question. I think instead of it being like this cut and dry thing, like extreme, like I'm either all in with this person or I'm all out. Instead, it should be, as we're seeing these red flags, we are taking note of them. We are not staying in denial. We take note of them and back up a little bit. So create a little more space. Don't be wide open and vulnerable with a person that's showing little subtle red flags. And don't just write them off either. So each time you witness this, you close yourself off a little bit more and a little bit more, create a little more space, and either that person will repent and change, or they'll reveal who they are and betray you. But at least at this point, you haven't stayed in denial about this person. You've backed up a little bit each time. So when that betrayal comes, it's not going to feel like this shock because you weren't in denial. You saw these things. You took steps to create space. So when the betrayal happens, it's not going to hurt as bad as it would if you had denied all these things and put them at the back of your mind. I believe that's the best way to handle these little red flags in a relationship. Now, on the other side, with that supernatural spiritual reaction that you have to someone with no evidence, I think that's a very strong warning from the Lord. I don't think the Lord wants you to engage with that person at all. So in that instance, that is probably a cut and dry disengage. And it's just not the same as, just having a relationship with someone and picking up on little things over time. So when you reflect back on these experiences in your life, were you really naive or were you in denial? That's something only you can answer. You were not in denial if you did not recognize the flag in the moment. If you only recognize the flag in hindsight, then you were naive, ignorant. And that's not an insult. You're just not trained in this area and maybe don't have that gift. So you just need to learn from those that do so that you don't have to experience these shocking betrayals. And if when you reflect, you realize you were always in denial and you saw these red flags all the time and just ignored them, then you're going to have to deal with that denial. And as bad as it hurts to acknowledge when a betrayal is that bad, when you saw so many red flags, you really have no one to blame but yourself for staying that long. And that's hard to accept because you're not the one who betrayed someone. But if the Lord gave you that gift, He expects you to use it. And that doesn't mean write everyone off that looks at you sideways. But it does mean stop being so open and vulnerable and wearing your heart on your sleeve and telling all your secrets to a person that's given you 10 red flags. find the balance, take note of these little red flags, take a couple steps back each time you see one. Betrayals are inevitable, but I promise it doesn't hurt nearly as bad if you stay out of denial and accept the truth when you see these red flags.